The apartment felt hollow. Since Leo's accident, Jonah couldn't bear to touch his husband's things. Leo's clothes still hung in the closet. His favorite book lay on the nightstand, half opened where he'd left it. Every room in the apartment seemed to echo with silence, amplifying the sense of loss. That first night alone, Jonah lay awake, his thoughts tangled in grief and disbelief, replaying the news of Leo's death over and over. Then, in the quiet of the early morning, a soft voice drifted through the bedroom. Jonah. It was unmistakable. Leo's voice, so familiar it felt like a touch. Jonah jolted up, searching the room in shock, but there was no one. Shaken, he settled back down, dismissing it as a figment of his grief-stricken mind. Yet, when he closed his eyes, he felt a cold presence in the room. He sat up again, and that was when he saw him. Leo stood at the foot of the bed, his expression stricken, a mix of sadness and fear. Before Jonah could react, Leo's from started to replay the exact moment of his death, reenacting the terror of the accident with heartbreaking clarity. And then, as suddenly as he appeared, Leo vanished, leaving Jonah alone in the silence once again. Jonah's heart raced. Was this real, or just his mind unraveling? The next day, Jonah couldn't shake the feeling of Leo's presence. He spent the afternoon poring over photos, messages, and fragments of their life together. He told himself it was just grief, manifesting in strange ways. But when night fell, the memory of Leo's appearance weighed heavily on him. That night, as if on cue, Leo returned. This time, Jonah didn't dismiss it. He reached out, but his hand met only empty air. He watched in horror as Leo once again went through the same moment of his death, the fear, the anguish, the finality in his eyes. Jonah called out, pleading for him to stop, to explain, but Leo disappeared before he could respond. Over the following nights, the same vision repeated, each time more detailed, more vivid, more painful. And each time, Jonah was left with an unshakable sense that Leo was trying to communicate, that his presence was more than just a figment of Jonah's imagination. Driven to find answers, Jonah spent his days sifting through Leo's things. He found an old laptop, an unmarked envelope, and notebooks that Leo had kept. Jonah had never thought to look through Leo's personal items before. Their relationship had been built on trust, but now he felt he had no choice. Leo's repeated, silent appearances seemed to beg him to search deeper. As he dug, Jonah unearthed pieces of Leo's life he'd never known. Emails with vague yet troubling messages, a note referencing a mysterious meeting, and names he didn't recognize. The words hinted at something unsettling, a life Jonah never knew Leo had lived. Had Leo been hiding something dark? Jonah's heart ached with the betrayal he felt, but his curiosity pushed him further. Every new clue suggested a side of Leo that Jonah had never seen, something tangled, unresolved, and possibly the reason behind these nightly hauntings. The nightly hauntings became more intense. The apartment became a maze of fear for Jonah. Every room seemed filled with the presence of his lost husband. His nights were sleepless, and he was beginning to feel Leo's trauma as if it were his own. He woke up drenched in sweat, sometimes feeling as though he were gasping for breath, as though he were the one dying. Jonah's fear began to spiral. Shadows in the apartment seemed to shift and follow him. Small items moved from their places without explanation. Was he losing his mind, or was Leo's ghost truly tethered to this place, reliving his own tragedy over and over? Jonah tried reaching out to friends for support, but he stopped himself from sharing the truth, fearing they'd dismiss him as crazy. He was on his own in this, and he was beginning to fear that Leo's spirit was leading him somewhere he might not survive. Jonah's obsessive search led him to an envelope hidden in Leo's belongings. His hands trembled as he opened it, revealing a single letter, a confession. The letter described a dangerous involvement Leo had never spoken about, a betrayal that went beyond Jonah's worst fears. Leo had been involved in a scheme with people he shouldn't have trusted, and his death was no accident. It had been retribution for choices he'd made and for secrets he'd kept from everyone, including Jonah. As Jonah read, horror settled in. He understood now that Leo had been carrying guilt long before his death, guilt that tied him to the earthly plane. Jonah was devastated, realizing the man he had loved was more complicated than he'd known. Now he was entangled in Leo's unfinished reckoning. He felt as if he, too, was bound to Leo's fate, trapped in the cycle of betrayal and remorse that haunted his husband's spirit. Determined to break the cycle, Jonah prepared himself to confront Leo's spirit directly that night. He waited, heart pounding, until Leo appeared, his form more tangible and his face more anguished than ever. This time, Jonah didn't look away. "Leo," he whispered, his voice choked with fear and sorrow. "Why did you keep all this from me?" Leo's ghost looked at him, eyes filled with tears, pleading. Jonah saw the regret, the sorrow, and the guilt in Leo's gaze. This was no longer just a haunting. It was Leo's own purgatory. A desperate plea for forgiveness. Jonah's own anguish mingled with Leo's as he felt the weight of their shared past, now tinged with the shadows of lies. Summoning all his courage, Jonah reached out and whispered, "I forgive you." He didn't know if Leo could hear, but he saw a calm settle over Leo's face. In that moment, Leo's form softened, his figure slowly fading, releasing Jonah from the oppressive weight that had haunted him. The apartment was eerily quiet. For the first time since Leo's death, Jonah felt a sense of peace. Yet, the peace was tinged with the hollow realization that Leo was truly gone. Jonah felt a strange mix of relief and profound loss. He had freed Leo's spirit, but in doing so, he had also severed the final connection they shared. Leo's ghost had left him, but he was left alone with the memories of a man he no longer fully knew. He took one last look at the apartment, imagining Leo there, smiling, whole and alive. His whispered, "Goodbye, love," felt like a release, a final farewell to the man he had both loved and lost twice. Days passed, and though the apartment felt lighter, Jonah was haunted by fragments of memories that didn't align with his previous understanding of Leo. Every so often, he caught glimpses of Leo's face in reflections, or heard the faintest whispers in the quiet of the apartment. He couldn't be certain if they were remnants of his own imagination or a lingering part of Leo, refusing to leave him. By night time, Jonah sat alone, a shadow of the man he once was, carrying both love and betrayal in his heart. He whispered once more, "Goodbye, love," and as he turned away, a faint voice responded, chilling him to the core. That was when he learned that some ghosts and some truths never truly fade.